Hi everyone, it is Vanna over at the ASDC. We are going to go ahead and begin this afternoon's T3 training webinar. First of all, thank you all for joining us again on this Wednesday. I know that we kicked off with a wonderful program on Monday. Many of you were with us then, so welcome back. We are excited, as I mentioned on Monday, to have over 2,300 Democrats at this point in our T3 program from all over the country and Democrats abroad. So again, welcome to you all. As you can see on your screen, today's webinar will focus on communications, specifically how to amplify the Democratic message in your state. We are pleased to be joined by Eric Walker, who you can see there on your screen. He is the Deputy Communications Director for the Democratic National Committee. And then we are also joined this afternoon by a special guest. Former Missouri Lieutenant Governor Joe Maxwell is with us. He will be with us at the latter part of our webinar to discuss messaging in rural areas. But before we begin, I would like to go over a few friendly reminders for you all before we dive in. First thing first, you are in listen-only mode, but if you have questions, feel free to type them into the questions box. I received a lot of emails after Monday from people who weren't quite sure how to get their questions answered, but you can type them into the questions box. The little module is displayed for you there on the screen, so just type your question and send it in. Lastly, we invite you all to connect with us via social media. Please use the hashtag that is listed there on your screen. It is the hashtag that we will use every week for the T3 series. It's hashtag ASDC. T and then the number 3. So go ahead and tweet out on or Facebook out that we are underway with our second T3 program of 2017. Also, really quickly, I just wanted to make sure you all were aware that if you're ever having trouble viewing the presentation, GoToWebinar has a feature at the top of at the top of your GoToWebinar module that you can increase the size of the screen. So I think it's automatically defaulted to 79%. Just click that button and increase it to 100%. The screen will appear a lot bigger. That way, if you can't see words on one of the slides, just increase the size there, and that should work for you. And then lastly, I do want to go over today's agenda for you all before we kick off. I've already given my welcome and friendly reminders. Eric will hop on in just a second to talk about the media landscape and some tactics. Then he will go into best practices for TV, print, and radio for you all. He'll talk about the issues, and then, as I mentioned at the top of the webinar, former Missouri Lieutenant Governor Joe Maxwell will be on with us to discuss messaging in red states and in rural areas. And then Eric will come back with us at the end to talk about messaging tools, and then at the end we'll open up the floor for questions and answers. But again, if you all have any questions, feel free to type them into the questions box, and we will get them answered for you. So without further ado, we have got a lot to cover this afternoon. I'm really excited for you all, so I will turn it over to Eric Walker to kick us off. Eric?
Great. Thanks, Vanna. Thank you all so much for being with us here. We're happy to provide these trainings, and I think that this stuff is so important and so valuable to get out there. This is this is the train passing by here at DNC headquarters. So it's going to be all killer, no filler. So let's jump right into it. First slide, you see, when you're starting your communications plan, or starting to think about how you want to communicate, you need to first examine the media landscape, and you can see the different types of media on here. There's one that is the most important to me, and probably to you folks as well, and that's local TV. By a 20-point margin, local TV is more trusted than national television, and with the decline of smaller state newspapers and local newspapers, TV has become the dominant player in a lot of local markets, especially among seniors, especially among older folks and folks who are of the non-millennial generation, of which I'm a member. And the video medium is important because that's easily shareable on social media. We send out so many video assets through our press releases and our social media channels, all with a lot of TV coverage there. So just keep that in mind and keep local TV front and center when you're thinking about your overall communication strategy. So if you want to do the next slide. Great, tactics. So here are the tactics that you would normally employ on a to get your message out. We're not going to spend a whole lot of time on these. We'll go into best practices for some of the most important ones. I know that I'm not an expert on social media. We're going to be having another social media training, I believe. Vanna, good. So I'm going to focus more on the traditional aspects of the communications and the message delivery. So, like I said, TV coverage, the most important thing. So if you're going to be rolling something out, or if you're going to be having a press conference, there's a number of steps that you should take in order to, get the best bang for your buck, and so that you don't waste time, you don't waste the reporter's time, and you make sure that you get what you need. Best thing is you need to have a strong visual. Whether it's bodies, whether it's an appropriate backdrop of a building, whether it's the signs that will pass what's called the barroom test. If the TV is on mute, can folks still understand your message based on the signs that are being displayed in the behind the speaker in the press conference? All these are very important, and because television is a visual medium, that's the number one thing that you need to worry about. In terms of logistics, you want to advise these with at least 24 hours notice, and you want to hit press before, especially television press, before they get into their morning editorial meetings. What usually happens is the folks in the newsroom come in around 8:30, and there's an editorial meeting between 9 and 9:30 where they discuss what they're going to cover for the day, and then they send the cameras out to cover it. And then there's another editorial meeting at around 2:30, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, where they discuss what's happening that evening and the next morning. So you want to be getting your advisory and your pitches out in those windows. So like it's not great to advise something at 10:30 and then call around, because they've already done their morning editorial meeting. So you want to hit them before they get to that editorial meeting and make sure that it's being discussed, and that hopefully the cameras will come and cover what you're putting together. And then you want to have your event in what's called what I would call the sweet spot, which is 10 a.m. to 2:30. It gives the cameras enough time to get out to the event, film it, come back to the studio, give it to the producer or the editor, who will cut it up, and then have it ready for the all-important 5 and 6 o'clock news. And if that fails, then the 11 o'clock news. So those are some logistical pieces of that. Big thing about television is again with the backdrop, I think that folks get a lot more utility out of, or it's a better messenger to have members of the public talking about the issues as opposed to a bunch of suits standing behind a podium. So any way that you can get local folks to come up and share their stories, and to get them one-on-ones with the local media that are there, it's extremely important, because I think that most viewers at home trust someone from the community, just a random person, as opposed to a politician dressed up in a suit who's talking about a particular issue, because there's a certain level of distrust. I mean, frankly, we live in an environment where trust in institutions and politicians are extremely low. And so we need to find different ways of getting our message out there, and that's really through the people in our community. In terms of other tactics, if it's not your event, like let's say today Scott Pruitt was in Indiana. Scott Pruitt is the EPA administrator. Was in Indiana, and there was a demonstration with environmental groups who are upset that they're proposing to close the Chicago EPA regional office, and that they think that the EPA hasn't paid enough attention to lead poisoning in Flint, Michigan, and in East Chicago, which is a city in Indiana. So if your goal is if someone else having an event, having a rally or a a demonstration out front is a good way to disrupt their coverage, and we refer to this practice as bracketing, making sure that that the other side doesn't get a free pass when they have their earned media event. A couple more things. If you don't have enough time to put together an event, but you want to respond to a story or comment on a story, you can send out what's called an AFI, an available for interview, where you just call the cameras over to your office and you have you or your county chair or your party chair, state party chair, or state party ED or comms director will talk to can just talk to the press and get a quick and easy hit and get your side of the story into the news. If you have a video camera, even if it's a cell phone camera, I would suggest coming to the event with that and recording it, and then cutting it up into the best sound bites, not only for press but also for social media. You want to do the reporters' work for them because they're overworked and stressed out. So if you film a video of a press event that you have and then you ship it out, this half-hour video to newsrooms, they're not going to watch the whole thing and they'll probably ignore it. You want to find the best, couple of sound bites, because then you send it to them. They don't have to watch a lot. They say, oh, that's a good thing that we can put into the coverage. Can't tell you how many media events that have gotten not a lot of press attention. They get a lot of press attention if you send out these sound bites and pitch it to the news producers to put it in the coverage. So next slide. Okay, moving on to print and press releases, etc. The number one thing is keep it short, get to the point, make it visually compelling. I try not, I try not to be verbose in my releases, and you'll see in a couple of examples that we have here, we like to use multimedia because reporters are bombarded by pitches. They're getting a ton of them every day, hundreds of emails, sometimes thousands of emails, and you want to make yours stand out so that you can get coverage. Sometimes that's with a pithy subject line. Sometimes that's with a piece of the quote in the subject line. But once you're into the meat of the release, you don't want to have a whole lot of you don't want to have a whole lot of filler in there, because it's not once again, these folks are overworked and they need to get to the point very quickly. Always follow up with a phone pitch. Write your pitches out and then practice them a little bit before you call the reporter, because then if you deliver a concise pitch and you don't take up a lot of their time, they're more likely to come to you for additional quotes. They're more likely to answer your call when you have a longer pitch that you want to give them. And then the final thing is, for a lot of small community papers or constituency papers, one's focused on, either like the African American community or the LGBT community in your area, or even just small community papers. These folks are struggling for content and they don't have a whole lot of reporters on staff. So the more that you can feed them content and do the reporters' work for them, the more likely you are to get good press and to make sure that your bosses or your issues, or you yourself, if you're on here as an elected official or party chair, that you're getting coverage. So these are just a couple of ways that we want to engage people with press. This is one that we sent out a couple of days. A couple of days ago. It had an emoji in the subject line, which makes it a little more compelling for press to look at. And then all killer, no filler. We get right to the quotes that we think that you should know about the Republican town halls and how folks across the country are standing up to Republican elected officials and telling them to hold Trump accountable. So that's one example, and then there's another example. We like to use a lot of videos, like screenshots. There's a tool in Microsoft called the snipping tool, or it's called the snipping tool. Familiarize yourself with it, because you can take a screenshot of anything on your screen, and embedding those visuals into your press release will get more attention than just a bunch of text on the screen. Now, a couple of other tactics that I wanted to discuss. Op-eds and letters to the editor. These are great because you have complete control over the message. Op-eds should be around 600, 700 words depending on the outlet. Shouldn't take you too long to write these out, but there's a pretty simple structure that you can follow. You need a compelling opening, and I'll get to that in a sec, but problem, solution, supporting evidence, and then a call to action. Identify whatever the problem is. The EPA has been asleep at the wheel on lead poisoning in Flint. Another problem is that Trump administration proposed a 31% cut to the EPA, and that they're closing a regional field office. What that means is that it's going to be harder for you and your family to get clean drinking water and clean air. Our solution: increase funding to the EPA, hold Scott Pruitt accountable, etc., and then list your supporting evidence, and then a call to action. Call your congressperson. Get out and vote. Speak out about this issue. Share this op-ed. Things like that are what I would encourage folks to do. In terms of an opening, you kind of need to grip the reader because there's a lot of different things that they could be reading, and a way to grab the reader at the beginning is a shocking statistic, a quote, a play on words, going against the conventional wisdom. You want to really grab people, and there's an example of this on the next slide. This is one that I worked with Diana DeGette's office to write in Colorado, and it was when Paul Ryan said that he would be Speaker of the House, but he would only do it if he could spend time with his family and he didn't have to fundraise on the weekend. Well, Mr. Speaker, that's nice, but what? People who aren't members of Congress also deserve a decent work-life balance and paid family leave, and so this was a good segue into the Congresswoman's message. In terms of letters to the editor, I would encourage you to write those. Those are 3 or 4 sentences, and I would encourage you to, if you're an elected official and you have constituents who call in with an issue, encourage them to write a letter to the editor expressing their view. You can also encourage them to call their local reporters and try to get on camera or to try to influence the coverage. You can try to make that connection with the television reporter. Like I said, getting personal testimonials from people in the community is the best way to get the message out, and it's far more trusted than a Paul with a suit, talking to the camera. So one more thing that I wanted to discuss, radio is one of my favorite things to do, especially drive time radio. You have a captive audience, everybody's stuck in traffic, everyone's listening to the same thing. It's usually 5-7 minute interview. My favorite thing is that it's an open book test, so you can have your notes, you can have your message out in front of you. So I would really encourage you to call into those morning shows, call into those afternoon talk shows. And it's a good way to get your message out, and it's also very cheap. You don't have to drive to a studio, you don't have to spend a whole lot of time, pitching. You just pick up the phone and you can do a drive time interview. So it's one of my favorite practices to do when I'm on campaigns, and I would encourage you all to do that as well. This is what I was talking about before, and it feeds into something that we've tried to do a little more at the DNC, and that's lift up stories from real folks in the community who are affected by policies. I think that too often Democrats and progressives, we read from a spreadsheet and we say, oh, X million people will be affected by this. Well, there's this old adage that a million deaths is statistic, while 1 death is a tragedy. If you can find a compelling example in the community to make your point, that's always going to work better than saying, 100,000 people are going to suffer because of X billion dollars worth of money cut. People don't have really a strong reference point for how much money that is or how many people that is. But they see, a compelling story, and, people are empathetic. They will put themselves in the other person's shoes and say, oh my God, what if that happened to me? And that's the effect that you want when you're communicating. So like I said, work with elected officials to find, if you are an elected official or if you're a staffer for an elected official, find those compelling stories in your communities. I worked for a bunch of elected officials on a bunch of campaigns, the best stuff was getting folks who like the example that I put forward here. We helped when I was in another office, we helped someone get her heating funding from the program. So instead of sending out a press release saying that, oh, Speaker Ryan is trying to cut all these things, which is going to affect 12 million people and yada yada yada, we found this woman to tell the story for us, and she was thankful that the Congress member that I worked for helped her get her heating, and it just worked so much better. So I would encourage you to let the people tell the story.
Perfect. I want to pause really quickly while we have a moment and open up, or I guess pause for a pop quiz, which we always like to do in our T3 webinars. I didn't mention this at the top of the webinar, but every webinar we like to announce pop quizzes. We'll announce a question, and the first person to type the answer into the questions box will win a small prize from the ASDC. So definitely stay alert throughout the webinar. But our pop quiz question for right now, as we break in the webinar, is Eric talked about op-ed structure a few slides ago, and in that he said that you should open by identifying what? Whoa, you all are fast, fast, fast. Let's see who the first person was. And when I call your name, if you will type your address into the questions box, and we will send you out a prize. It looks like Wendy Kinkad, Kinkead. I think I said that correctly. Wendy, if you will type your address into the questions box, we will send you a prize from the ASDC. And also, before I turn it back over to Eric, really quickly, a few people have asked if they are supposed to be seeing Eric. Yes, he is on webcam, so there should be a button in your GoToWebinar modules to where you can see both the PowerPoint and Eric. So definitely, we want you all to get the visual as well. So I will turn it back over to Eric to continue in his presentation.
Great, thank you. So now that was a bit on the tactics. Now we want to move into the messaging. We're going to start out with the negative, and then we're going to move over to the positive because it seems like it's very hard to get a positive message out there, especially when you have so much bad stuff happening right now and an administration that just dominates the news cycle with all of the chaos. We've seen what works against Trump and what doesn't work, and I think that there's been a collective realization that, folks have established that he attacks communities of color, he attacks women, he's a rich guy. All these things aren't really. These are points that have been made. The issue is that we have not undermined his populism and his outsider status enough, which are the things that he uses to appeal to the new Republican base. So there are a few things that we want to focus on when we're talking about Trump, and honestly, this can be connected to the entire Republican Party because, when you look at their economic agenda, it doesn't matter if it's Trump or Governor Brownback in Kansas or Governor LePage in Maine. They all want the same thing, which is to take away the things that families care about so they can give tax cuts to them and their rich friends. So that's one of the main things. Also making sure that we highlight the hypocrisy between saying, oh, I'm a reformer and I'm going to drain the swamp, and then really he's basically turned the government over to a bunch of Wall Street stooges and the same D.C. insiders and lobbyists that he attacked during the campaign for being part of the swamp. And now we don't only have his rhetoric to go off of, but now we have a record. And after his first 100 days, his doesn't really have that many accomplishments. The main thing that he tried to do is take health care away from 24 million people, drive costs up for seniors, and threaten to reduce coverage for addiction and mental health treatment. And the second big thing is his budget, where he cuts things like Meals on Wheels and PBS and job training and economic development for a lot of the areas that supported him. The Appalachian Regional Commission, the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative. There's one in the Mississippi Delta as well. So cutting these, there are manufacturing partnerships And things that currently support U.S. jobs or are there to support U.S. jobs in areas where he did well, and he's trying to cut them. So it just underscores the message that he's not out for you, he's not, you know, in your corner, he's not fighting for you, he's only fighting for himself and his rich friends and the Wall Street billionaires and DC insiders who are currently in his government. Couple more messages on there. You know, whenever he tries to talk about manufacturing, just throw it back in his face that he makes his all of his goods overseas. You know, I think we could have talked about that a little more in the campaign, and we're talking about it now. He was just in Wisconsin, and there were protests outside calling him outsourcer in chief, and there was a lot of great local coverage of the protests about how he hires foreign workers at his resorts, how he makes all his products overseas. He uses cheap imported Chinese steel to build his buildings. So the guy has really been screwing over American workers and getting rich off of using cheap foreign goods and cheap foreign labor. The final thing is, and this is, you know, it kind of cuts both ways, but you know, now that we are in the out party, we can make this argument, and also because this is unprecedented, the amount of time that he's taken off. But you know, he's just lazy. He's accomplished so much less than his predecessors in the first 100 days, and yet every other weekend you turn around, he's at Trump property taking a vacation, or he's hitting the links. So I think that it just underscores the narrative that he's not there to help people get a job. He's not there to help you and your family put food on the table. He's only there to help himself and his rich friends, and that's really been our message. And coming up on April 29th, if you want to hit the slide, there's it's going to be his first 100 days. And so our big theme is that we want to focus on the broken promises. And I went into this on the last slide, but you know, the promise about draining the swamp, the promise about creating jobs, and instead he's cutting things that help jobs in the budget. He said, oh, we're going to have a great health care plan. It's going to be better than Obamacare. We're going to have health care for everyone. BS. His first thing was to try to take health care away from 24 million people. The China visit, you know, he said he would get tough on China. Now he's not going to label them a currency manipulator. He's not going to get tough on trade with China. And then, of course, the Gulf silliness. Now, that's the negative stuff on Trump. Here's the positive stuff about ourselves. So we did something called the Messaging Project with a firm in DC, and they came out with this is a good way of talking about ourselves and what Democrats stand for. And you know, I'm not going to go all through this, and the next couple of slides, if you can just tick through them quickly. These are, you know, some suggested messages for the issues that we care about. And if you want to hit the next couple, yeah, this one on taxes and jobs, etc. But I think that one thing that we've learned from 2016, and one thing that's been evident for a while, is that you can't go and regurgitate the poll-tested talking points. You know, it has diminishing utility. You know, you need to be authentic. You need to find a way to put this into your own words. You need to find those local examples and localize the messaging. You know, as I said before, you know, people don't conduct a reasoned analysis of the two candidates most times. They vote based on their gut. They vote based on their emotions. And, you know, it's an emotional turnoff when you seem wooden, or, you know, that you're just, you know, reading off of the sheet of poll-tested talking points. So, I mean, we're going to be providing this presentation to everyone so you can look through them. But, you know, I would find a way to localize this message, find those local stories, and lift up those local stories. Let them tell the story. Let your constituents and let the folks in your community tell the story for you. Use their voices as opposed to your own to lift this up. Also, I would focus relentlessly on the economics. It's something that we all have in common. You know, middle-class wages have stagnated, and things have gotten tougher for folks at the bottom end of the economic spectrum. Meanwhile, the rich have seen their incomes go up exponentially. This is something that it doesn't matter if you're white working class, if you're African American working class, if you're Hispanic working class, or, you know, anything, you know, middle class. if you're not a gazillionaire, you're getting squeezed. So regardless of what your background is, what your immigration status is, sexual orientation, anything like that, we all want the same thing. And that's we want the opportunity to succeed, make a decent wage, and give our kids a better opportunity than we had. That's the bottom line. That's what we stand for. That's our mission statement as a party. If you play by the rules, you should be able to succeed, no matter how you got here. I think that has to be the driving force behind everything that we do, and it helps us drive a wedge between, or separate us from the Republicans who are only there to cut taxes for their rich friends and tell everybody else to get lost. And when you're in doubt, just tie it back to that big picture. Democrats stand for middle-class folks, people who work for a living, folks trying to make it. The Republicans, all they care about is helping the rich. All they care about is helping their rich friends. And when you look at their economic plan, cutting taxes for the rich and doing away with everything else that you and your family depend on to get by. The final thing that I would say is that we are at a nadir in terms of elected leadership on the Democratic side. This is when there's a good opportunity for us to go on offense, because we can make the Republicans own the economic squeeze, and we make them own the disastrous Trump agenda and the agendas that Republicans are putting on in their states as well, whether you're in Kansas or Ohio or Florida, these states with these unified control of Republican legislators. They're doing some really horrible stuff, and connecting it back to that main frame of Democrats represent middle class and working people. Republicans are only in it for the rich, and finding those local voices in your community and lifting them up to press. That's the way that we're going to win. That's the way that we're going to take legislatures back and House seats back and Senate seats back and ultimately the presidency back. So at this point, I'm a little bit over time, but I want to turn this over to someone who can go into much more detail than I can, and that is Missouri Lieutenant Governor Joe Maxwell, who's going to talk a little bit about helping to move your neighbors from that red zone to the blue zone. So, Governor, please take it away.
Well, thank you. I need to make sure the technology is working. Are you all able to see me on the screen?
Actually, Governor, we can see your tie and your shirt, just not your face. So if you'll tilt your screen just a little bit, and we should be able to see you.
I appreciate, and I apologize.
A little bit higher, just a little bit higher, and that should be fine.
Higher. Well, I mismeasured.
Oh, it's got to be higher than that.
Okay, well, I apologize to everybody that I'm delaying this. We're running.
No, no worries. And while the governor is getting his screen fixed, I know that a number of you have asked in the questions box how you can get the slides. A copy of the slideshow will be emailed out to you this Friday, so just hang tight and we'll send it out to you Friday, along with a copy or a recording of this webinar, so you will have it all. And then, okay, so we can see you now, Governor. You can go ahead and take over.
Thank you very much. One, I appreciate the opportunity to be on this program, and I want to congratulate all the 2,300 or plus people that have joined tonight. Thank you for being the backbone of our Democratic Party. It is those of you on this call and across this country that will really deliver the victories in 2018. I'm happy to provide a little bit of my understanding and experience as it relates to red states, purple states gone red, and I have as kind of the title, Moving Your Neighbor Blue. I'm a former Missouri Lieutenant Governor. I'm a former DNC member. I'm a founding member of the Democratic Legislative Campaign Committee and believe very much in our party and believe that we are on track for a winning 2018 and 2020. The first thing that I'm speaking mostly, I don't have a list of where all of you all are from, but understand I'm really wanting to hone in on those states that were purple turned red, or the red states were wanting to move purple. And I mentioned as the title of my presentation, Moving Your Neighbors Blue. What we have to remember is the fact of the situation is that there's not a lot of us Democrats left in these areas. We're not going to be able to use a model where we overperform in certain sectors and win elections. We have 10 Democrat U.S. senators who are in states for which Trump won. And just simply overperforming in urban regions or modeling along those lines and metrics is not going to deliver victories. You all on this call, on this webinar, are going to deliver the victories because you're going to work at moving your neighbors back to our side. And you have to think about this. One, I use the word neighbor because not everyone out there is our enemy. Trump is doing horrific things to our country and to our society. He has set us back at least 40 or 50 years. So I'm not here to tell you that those are horrific things and deserve anger and deserve activism to stop. But if we're going to stop Trump and we're going to win in 2018, then we're going to have to remember these are our neighbors. And we need to meet them where they are. Recognize that many of them voted for Trump. But at the same time, many of them were Democrats not long ago, or at least independents. And so if you come at them too hard, too much with strong language about, well, you know, everybody voted for Trump, or, you know, Trump this, Trump that, then they are going to hunker down and we're not going to move them our way. Some of the language that works that I've used is, I know what Trump said, so you aren't attacking them personally, but here's the reality of what's happening in our country today, and we have to make a change in 2018. By not being out in their face, we can move them towards us, and that's very important in the early stages, that we don't drive people right in the ground and lock them in a defensive posture, because it only costs more or takes more to move them. You can't, the other thing that we have to be for, and the slides presented is, we can't just be beginners. I'm traveling in a lot of the red states now, and I notice a lot of our activists were against things. We have to remember, as they said earlier, to push the positive message. You can't just be against things and move people or win elections. You have to also be for something. We have to remember to be advocates as much as activists. And what do I mean by that? Plant those seeds, raise awareness and educate, and then walk away and let the seeds you planted sprout to bring Democrats or bring individuals back over to our party. Remember, you're moving your neighbors to your way of thinking. They're not our enemies. The other issue that I find so much that we really need to focus on, I think as a party as a whole, and I'm really proud of our new chair, Chairman Perez, and Deputy Chair Ellison. They've been out on the road here really talking and hitting home on some of the values of our party. Too often, those of us who are activists on many of these issues, environment, healthcare, whatever it might be, we talk about the issues that were so important to us. But issues don't move people. We have to remember, if we're right on the issues. So often I hear Democrats say, well, how come they keep voting against their personal interest? It's because our issues are dangling and not tied to values. As it was said earlier, people ultimately sometimes just vote out of emotion. I would also suggest that they vote out of their base values, as how they identify themselves as a person. And we have to work hard not to just dangle the issues as the basis for moving individuals. Let me give you an example. The chair was speaking on, I think it was one of the NPR or one of them the other day as they launched the tour, and talked about economic opportunity, and it was also mentioned earlier today. You know, the thing the Democrat Party stands for is to ensure that everyone, and I mean everyone in America, has the opportunity at their piece of the American dream. At that economic opportunity for security, that's what binds us together as a people, and that is a value that heavily resonates in red states. It's a value they get. If you work hard, you ought to get a return. If you sweat and you bleed on behalf of the company, then you should get something in return. And so we have to remember to explain the why and then the issue. The why is the core value, and I suggest that one of the best values in our party stands for since 1792 with Thomas Jefferson and James Madison forming our party. It was about opportunity, the American dream, everybody getting a piece of the prosperity pie. I'll give you an example, as I mentioned earlier, make it personal. Find the stories in your community. Put a face on the issue. If the issue is healthcare, think about that person in your community who she gets up every day. She's hustling 2 jobs, punching 2 time clocks, building wealth for a company in Wall Street. What is her piece of the American dream? Shouldn't it be the ability to have a livable wage and health care for her children when they get sick, certain security economically? That's her piece of the pie. So when you talk about health care, frame it around why individuals in America should have access to health care. Too often we just say everybody should have health care. Personally, I have voted for universal health care. But you know, when you go there, if you aren't careful and you don't put the why in place, especially in these ag states, these red states, purple states, then it sounds like we're just a bunch of do-gooders that are going to give away a bunch of programs. And the people we're trying to move by 2018 just turn a deaf ear to us and never give us a chance to move our issues into the play. I think it's very important to remember people do not vote for issues. If they did, Democrats would have swept last election. People vote for values, for what their gut says, what their emotions say, what they believe is right. And so we have to frame it in that way. The other thing I think, and some of you all, I know I talked to those at the DNC, I know you all are in some deep red states and wanted to know about how you talk to folks and how you get the press. The last point I want to make tonight in the time that we have available is staying out of the traps. Too often we say too much or go too much into detail. One of the things that I tell folks is when you're asked that question, and oftentimes, you know, we're Democrats. We have a wide range of individuals' issues in our party, issues that we support. Together, we support those issues. But sometimes you may not understand them, feel comfortable with them, or know how to address them. One of the best techniques that I've taught candidates and Democrat leaders is divert. You say, well, I'm not sure about that, but what I know is our Democrat Party here in this county or in this state, whatever level you are, we're about ensuring that if you get up every day, you go to work, that you ought to have a livable wage. That's your piece of the economic dream, of the American dream. So don't get in the trap where we try to over-explain things that we don't feel comfortable with or don't have the knowledge to do. And too often, especially at the local level, we get trapped by that microphone, or we get trapped by that other candidate. The other point is Democrats sometimes we're just too nice. We're so nice sometimes that we don't even appear to have values. We don't want to offend anybody, so we don't speak in value statements. Sometimes we're also too nice just to tell people when what their facts are just false. And Democrats in these red states have to stand up, not that you haven't been, but we have to stand firm. When that other candidate, when the other party, when that news reporter, whatever the situation, is spilling out a bunch of false facts, we need to say, you know, that's just simply false. Let me tell you what I know. I like the framing of what I know because it makes you an expert. People tune in more if they see someone that they have the knowledge. But we need to call them out. We need to hold firm, and we need to be able to speak in values. The last point I want to make about not getting in a trap is, and also that binds in this neighbors idea, where we're going to have to really move people our way because these states are so deeply red now, or were purple and moved, and we're going to have to move folks our way. One of the lines that I use a lot in out in the countryside is I say, when I'm in a group of people, I'm trying to move them back over to the party, over to our issues, is I instead of making it too personal, but they're just wrong, don't call them a liar. I've seen that in several states here recently. Rather, I say, I understand that is what you think. Let me tell you what I know. Give them just a little space. When you're framing for press releases, make sure you involve a value statement, something about your community. Make sure you try to have a personal story, as already been said several times. Remember that you're speaking through that press, on that camera, in that microphone, to your neighbors. And think about how you, living there in your community, can best communicate the values of the Democrat Party so that our candidates do not have to run away from the Democrat label, but can run straight for it and run on the Democrat platform. I thank you very much for the opportunity to be here and visiting with you on the webinar today.
Governor, thank you so much for that. And as someone who's always trying to learn more, that was incredibly insightful presentation. So I want to jump right into the Q&A here, and there's one question that everybody's asking, and will this be available afterwards? Yes, it will be. The video of this, of us talking, and also the PowerPoint deck here with those messaging slides that I kind of skipped over in the interest of time. So with that, there's actually a couple of ones here for you, Governor. And the first one that I saw is, can you give an example of taking a value statement and turning that into an issue? Or an issue and turning that into a value statement?
Yes. First of all, issues, my belief in my experiences is that values get you elected. Values define our party, and it's why people will belong to our party or align with our party during the time. Issues are the evidence that you have that value. That's how they're hinged together. So an example would be, as I mentioned, on education, but let's say it's on veterans issues. The value that I believe the Democrat Party has is that our veterans pay a price for our freedom, and in return, this country and our freedom owes them, and then whether that's health care, whether that's veteran services, whether that's a GI Bill. I always like to remind folks on that issue that the GI Bill that helped build America after World War II is a Democrat platform, was a Democrat issue. I think if we talk about the Flint water one, or whichever one was on water, one of the values that Americans hold is if I pay for a good or service, I should get something in return. If I've been talking about clean water, then I say that consumers pay for TVs, computers, and their water. When they turn on their computer, they expect it to come on. When they turn on the tap, they expect to have safe, clean drinking water. And for their investment, or their payment, that's what they deserve. Trying to put it into values that an individual already has, or a mindset that they already have about an economic situation or the economic or the economy that we have. On conservation, I'll add one. what's a value to a lot of people in these red states, whether you're urban based where you went out in the countryside or you went fishing or you went out and enjoyed the country is to say, what's unfortunate about this pollution out of these CAFOs, confined animal feeding operations, if you're out there, is the fact that I won't be able to take my children or my grandchildren fishing at the same stream where my grandpa did. There's just something wrong with that in America. You try to bring in that heritage or that value when you speak about your issues, as opposed to just saying polluting is bad and horrible companies.
I agree with that, and there's and I see another question here about environmental issues. Bringing it back to the human aspect. I don't think that many people care about, frankly, what happens to polar bears or an endangered species. You have to make it real to people and what they experience. There's going to be more natural disasters if the climate keeps changing. Which is going to be more expensive, and it could endanger your life. Water levels are going to rise. There's going to be more droughts in areas like, if you live out in the West, there have been droughts in California, Nevada, and Colorado, which is going to make it harder for you to get by. So connecting those economic issues to personal experience, I think, is something that's really key here. There's a few more questions here that we want to get to. This is a good one. Sorry, the screen keeps moving here. I'm in a rural Republican county. The local weekly newspaper won't publish anything Democratic. TV stations in a major city, it's hard to get coverage. How would you, how did you do it when you were in the governor's office or the lieutenant governor's office in Missouri?
Well, first, and I don't think we can stress this enough, and both of us have done so, but one, make it personal. If the issue is healthcare or education, on education in America, if you're going to have an opportunity for your piece of the American dream, your opportunity to be, and when I'm in a more faith-based, I'll say, to be all that God meant the child to be, you have to have an education. One of the tactics I've used is actually inviting, the backdrop is actually that home, is actually that family. Making it personal oftentimes entices those smaller papers, because then it's as much about the community as it is D versus R. So thinking about the value of your community, how to frame it in a way that entices that editor or that news director, and then give the backdrop a scene in the community, the family in the community. What's happening here at home, I think, is a great strategy. Not that there aren't others, but that would be the one I'd recommend to try out the gate.
Agree, and I'm going to get this into this in another slide, but one thing, and this is just a blanket across the board rule, reporters are people. Go out and meet with them and have coffee, have a beer, have lunch with them, get to know them, because there's a night and day difference between you cold calling a reporter and asking them to try to care about some issue, and you actually sitting down with them face to face so that you can talk to them and develop that sort of personal relationship, which is going to pay dividends in the long term. I've seen night and day coverage change just with the simple act of getting coffee with a reporter and letting them know that you're available and that you're going to be coming to them with pitches and that you're going to be helping them with content. So that's another thing that in there. I just want to deal with a few more things, then we'll get back into into the Q&A. And frankly, I could stay here for a while and answer more questions. So if you've got them, please throw them out. These are just a few more best practices out here. When you're in the campaign, you want to have a message calendar where you're layering your paid communications with your earned communications. So let's say you're doing an ad or mailer on education funding. Have a press event that week at a school with teachers union and talk about education funding there with some kids. make sure that you are matching these things up so that, folks are hearing your message in a variety of different ways through a print story, a television story, a radio story, and then a television advertisement, a digital advertisement, or, a piece of mail coming to the house. A few other things. Your campaign's core message, whatever that is, wherever you're running, you might think that if I say this message one more time, I'm going to throw up. That's when you're first starting to break through the voters. Voters have to hear something 8, 10, 12 times through a variety of media before they begin to understand and internalize the message. So that's why message discipline is important, and why repetition is important. And while it seems it can be frustrating, and you can feel like it's shallow, to just repeat the same thing over and over again in a variety of different forms, you have to realize that people have a lot more going on in their lives. For a lot of folks on this call, politics is your life. You're an elected official, you're a party staffer, something like that. But for a lot of folks, they have real life. They are picking their kids up from soccer practice. They, had a bad day at work. They're going to see, they're going on vacation. They don't have all the time for politics, so you have to keep bombarding them with the message over and over. This is a big one for state municipal candidates. Most of the big press gets eaten up by president, Senate, governor, congressional representative. If you're running for state assembly somewhere like in New York City, or if you're in a large media market and you're running for a down ballot race, make sure that you focus on the things that are really going to make the difference in the campaign, and prepare relentlessly for them. I know this from personal experience, where we put more effort into proposing all these policies that no one ever cared about, or the media never covered, and we didn't prepare enough for the big things, which were the campaign kickoff, the debate, and the editorial board endorsement meeting, which are, in my book, the 3 key things that you have to prepare for as a candidate. A couple more things. Speed kills. If you're in a competitive media environment, there's going to be a bunch of people weighing in on an issue. Get out there first, because then you'll get the quote in the newspaper, and you'll be able to elevate your profile like that. A good communicator does the reporter's job for them. If you're writing a news release, write it as if you're writing a hard news story. Give it to the reporter. Sometimes, we'll send out a release, and it will get pasted verbatim on a news site. I love that. I've just controlled the entire message. And, I didn't have to pitch a reporter or anything like that. And the final thing, from my personal experience of having my emails stolen by the Russians and posted online, it is not fun to have reporters picking through your personal messages. So if it's something controversial, I would pick up the phone and talk about it with a person. And even if you're with a reporter and you have to go off the record to talk about it, if it's controversial, pick up the phone. You don't want to be in a situation where you have controversial information in your personal email messages. They're getting dumped out into the public domain, and take it from personal experience. So that's what I have. Oh, sorry. I'm sorry, Governor. Just a couple of more things. There are a lot of tools that the DNC can offer to you. The main thing is that we send out talking points and message guidance and clips almost every single day. If you want to visit this site, it's bit.ly. We use what's called a bit.ly link, which shortens this. bit.ly/talkerslist. There's a Google form where you put in your name and your email address and your affiliation, and we can get you those talking points and make sure that you're getting the message that we're putting out of the building. We have a regional and constituency press department with regional press secretaries who focus on certain areas. Encourage you to reach out to them, especially with your state party. Use your state parties. That's where they have a lot of the press lists where you can get in touch with reporters. They have a lot of that expertise in the state, so I would definitely reach out to your state parties and work with them. We also have relationships with national groups to help build crowd or interest for earned media events. There is a whole archipelago of progressive groups now. Some of them have been around for a while, like Planned Parenthood or the Sierra Club, very old. And then there's ones that have just popped up since the recent election, like Indivisible and Town Hall Project. And they're all focused on the same thing, which is elected Democrats and moving the progressive agenda down the field. And these new groups, there's a lot of energy out there, and these new groups are helping us as the NC harness this energy and point it in the right direction, which right now is holding Republicans accountable at these town hall meetings, protesting them in front of their offices, putting them on the spot for supporting, harmful legislation or harmful things that Trump is doing. So that's a key piece of what we bring to the table. We also love to take state-level stories. If there's some malfeasance going on in your state, like voter ID in Iowa, or like I said with Scott Pruitt and the EPA in Indiana today. We love to take those and lift them up to national reporters and kick up a storm around these local issues and really expose some of this Republican malfeasance at the state and local level. And then we have a number of research and digital and video assets, which I think we're going to get to in other presentations. So with that, I know we've gone over time, but I can stick around and do some questions as well. So just scrolling through here, the question list. What can we do about gerrymandering, like in Indiana? And I know that there's a lot of states where there's a lot of gerrymandering. The midterm elections are the key. 2018 is the key. Getting Democratic governors in there and electing Democrats at the state level, that's what's going to determine the congressional map and what's going to determine your state Senate and state legislative maps as well. So if you had $1 in your pocket and you could spend it one place, I would get it to that governor candidate or that state legislative candidate in your local area, because that's where we're going to win back the majority, and that's where we're going to turn a lot of these gerrymandered House of Representatives districts in our favor, and that's with electing Democrats at the state level. And maybe you want to talk about that a little more, Governor.
No, that's exactly right. It all happens on the ground, and 2018 is critical because the census will come out in 2020. Probably not anything more important to us at this juncture than ensuring that we can have those victories at that state legislative race and that gubernatorial race.
Mm-hmm. We have the classic "What's the matter with Kansas?" question. We have folks who vote against their economic interests because they've been led down the Pied Piper path by folks on the right who have been pushing social issues as opposed to economic issues, because they know that the economic issue, they're not in line with what a majority of Americans think about healthcare or tax policy or job creation, things like that. So my solution, and this is something that we should have done more of on the campaign, that we need to do across the board, and that's keep the focus on the economic message relentlessly and connect it back to people's lives. If there's a service that you care about, there's probably a Republican politician who's trying to cut it. And so you find those services that people rely on, whether it's their kids' school, that just lost funding for the football team or for the chess club because of budget cuts. If there's an environmental problem in your area that's not being fixed because the EPA or the state equivalent doesn't have the money for it. These are all things that affect people's lives, and so making sure that you connect it back to those economic issues, I think, is the way that we're going to get some of these folks back onto our side, and who have been swayed or led astray by the Republicans who are focusing on these divisive wedge social issues. If
I could just add one thing, I think what's the matter, what's going on in Kansas, again, these individuals will vote in these red states and rural communities, will vote against their self-interest every time because they're value-based voters. when we do not connect our issues to core value within that community, then we lose. The other side is our masters at simplicity and values. I mean, to them, guns is about freedom. It's not about bullets and guns. It's about freedom. They cast issues and core values. For instance, on the economic message, you know, in Kansas, Missouri, Oklahoma, Iowa, Nebraska, Wisconsin, Minnesota, the Dakotas, you know, it's about Democrats are going to ensure that Main Street thrives and not everything goes to Wall Street. And we're going to ensure that our community, our citizens have the tools necessary to get their share of the prosperity and the American dream. And then you can talk about education, because without education, you cannot advance in this country. You go to work, you have a right to assurances that you're going to get a livable wage and a return on what you invest in that company is a return in wages, retirement, and health care. That's your piece of the prosperity you build for that company. We talk about roads and bridges, men and women on the bridge crew. They give their blood, their sweat. They should have for, let's say, work comp and labor. They should have the opportunity that if they get injured on the job, for their sweat and their blood to build the prosperity, to build our roads, to build our future, that they should be taken care of, their family should be taken care of if they're injured on the job. That's how you frame these issues to where then they care. It's more than just the issue. It has to be framed in a way that it touches a core value that sparks that emotion in them of how they identify themselves as a community and as a people.
So thank you, Governor. I was seeing another question here, and it's, you know, we have a lot of friends from blue states on who, you know, probably live in a large city where, you know, their state elect or California, you know, state elected officials are all Democrats, and what can you do to help out your neighbors? There's a couple of organizations called Sister District, and there's another one called Swing Left, which I would encourage you to check out. And these folks, they focus on, you know, if you live in a blue area, then you can help, you know, the district next door help flip that seat over, or the state next door. And, you know, this is something that we've been doing at you know, at the national party level for a while, which is, you know, instead, like, there's no, on the presidential level, you know, there's not a whole lot of utility in campaigning in California. So we'll organize bus trips, you know, to go to Vegas to try to, you know, turn Nevada blue, or Phoenix to try to turn Arizona blue. So there are some good resources there, but also, you know, donating to the, and I know this is a shameless plug, I mean, every group out here is looking for money, but donating to the Democratic Party or the DCCC, because we're the ones who can identify where that money is going to do the most good and where our resources can be put into competitive races to make sure that we're using our resources strategically. There's one more thing that I wanted to piggyback off of with the education that you mentioned, Governor, and that's, you know, it's such a strong issue because it represents the future, and that's why you saw so much opposition, I think, to Betsy DeVos as the education secretary. You know, she, other than the labor secretary, but, you know, they had to bring in Mike Pence to break the tie vote, which is a big deal. And people were so opposed to that, I think, largely because, you know, people see her as a real threat to their kids' opportunity, which is, you know, one of those values that we all agree on, that we all want our kids to have a better life than we currently have, and we want them to have more opportunities in their lives. So actually, at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Hannah for, or sorry, I'm so sorry, Vanna, for a couple of housekeeping things, and then, you know, I want to do a little bit more Q&A, and Governor, I'm not sure what your time frame is, but I think I could stick around till about 7:30 and do some questions, 6:30 on your time. I'm not sure what your schedule is over there.
I'm happy to stay if that would be beneficial.
Perfect, great. So I know that we are just a little bit over time here, but before you all, you know, start to trickle away for your dinner tonight, I want to go over a couple of housekeeping items as it relates to the T3 program as a whole. So let me go through those really quickly. First things first, I know that, well, we'll do a pop quiz in just a second. But first things first, a couple of you are still asking for the PowerPoint. We'll go ahead and send the PowerPoint out after the webinar tonight, and we'll just attach it to the evaluation that'll go out here in just a few minutes after the webinar. I guess people who didn't attend the webinar tonight will have to wait till Friday to get the PowerPoint. So for those of you on tonight, you'll have the PowerPoint after the webinar. Just click on the email with the evaluation. Other than that, on your screen here, you'll see what's coming up next in the T3 program. Next week, we will start our digital series where we will talk about email organizing on Monday. There's a curriculum there for you. And then we'll dive into social media organizing on next Wednesday. So definitely register for those when the links come out on Friday. Speaking of Friday, you will get registration links to our next webinars that are coming up next week, as well as links to recorded webinars from this week. So Monday's webinar and tonight's webinar, along with those PowerPoints, will be in an email for you Friday. So be on the lookout for those. And then let's see here. I think that is about just about it. So just be on the lookout for your inbox on Friday for all of those things. And I'm going to let Eric dive back into some questions here in just a second before we get into that reminder about your evaluation. Go back. A quick pop quiz for you before we get back into questions. A couple of people were asking for answers to the previous pop quiz. The first pop quiz, that answer was the problem is the first thing that should be, that you should open up an op-ed with, is identifying the problem. So our very last pop quiz for the night, Governor Maxwell mentioned, talked a lot about how we identify with voters. And one of the things that he mentioned is that people don't vote for issues, they vote for blank. If you will fill in the blank and the first person to answer that will get a lovely prize from the ASCC. It looks like Diane Norris, you were the first, and the answer to that was value. So Diane Norris, if you will type your address into the questions box, we will send a small prize from the ASCC to you. So Eric, I'm going to turn it back over to you all to answer a few more questions tonight. And if you all have to go, if you don't have any other questions, we'll see you back on Monday night for our next T3 training webinar. So if you have questions, stick around. If you want to continue the discussion with Eric and Governor Maxwell, please stick around.
Great. Thank you, Vanna. And thank you to the ASCC for putting this on, and thank you to the governor, Governor Maxwell. Just want to keep going through these questions a little bit. This is an interesting one. I live in an affluent neighborhood. I'm not sure that folks will identify with disadvantaged, and what kind of story can we tell to engage them? You know, the way I feel about this is 90% of the country thinks that they're middle class, you know, because, you know, folks who are at the lower end of the economic spectrum don't want to, you know, put themselves in those shoes, and people at the upper end of the economic spectrum are, you know, might be a little embarrassed by their success. So most of the country thinks that they're middle class. And, you know, in recent years, everyone's been getting squeezed economically, you know, since, you know, a lot of the deregulation that happened in the Reagan years and through the Great Recession. So I think that, you know, everyone is feeling the squeeze. So you know, making sure that we're playing back to our values and making sure that people know that Democrats care about folks in the middle class and folks who are working their way into the middle class. I think focusing on that, you know, is really the way to go, because everyone has an issue that they care about that they don't think gets enough attention, or that they don't think that they're getting ahead on. And you know, that's from, you know, whether you're making $30,000 a year or, you know, up to like around probably $300,000 a year, you probably think that same way. I don't know if you feel the same way, Governor.
No, that's absolutely correct. Those numbers always amaze me, but the bulk of Americans believe that they're middle class. It's amazing to me also between across states, urban, suburban, rural, how many share the actual same core values. And so I think a lot of these tactics and issues work very well in those communities.
Mm-hmm. I think this one would be a great one for you, Governor. How do we overcome the abortion question with a values frame in those red areas?
Yeah, I think as an elected official in the past, I've had to personally address that. I'm a choice candidate and was a choice elected official in the state of Missouri. I think the first thing to do in a red state is to deflect the fact that you're for abortions. The framing that the Republicans like to have is that you're for them. And so you start off by acknowledging the fact that that you know, I am not, if you're a candidate, you know, well, I'm not for abortions, but I know in many instances that you know, that for the, you know, whatever line you want to use, the one thing I do know is that government has no place in this decision. This is a personal decision about the health, women's health. They should have a right to make that decision. You don't have to own that you're for it. You have to deflect that. That's the box they'll try to put you in. Then you move quickly to the fact that it's a woman's choice. It's her health. Especially this is usually debated by a bunch of guys. So you deflect it immediately and remind the audience that this is about a woman and her health and her ability to make those choices about her health. And that's the best way to deflect and to move. There's going to be communities that just don't support that. I will tell you that I'm seeing out there in many states fewer single-issue voters on the pro-life side on this issue. There's other issues beginning to resonate higher in their value system. And so I do think it's getting to be a little less of an issue than what it was 2 cycles or 3 cycles ago.
Amen. There's an interesting question, and I think that I want to take this in 2 parts. The first one, as a voter in Oklahoma District 2 at Representative Mullen's town hall meeting, constituents with cell phone cameras made the difference. That's very true. Make sure that you're going to these town hall meetings and that you're holding these Republicans accountable. It's a huge national story, and if you can elicit, all it takes is one offhand comment, and then boom, you got them, and you can run ads on that comment, when the election comes around. One thing about the town hall is a lot of these Republicans, what they've been trying to do is they try to hold a teletown hall, which is a way, what they do is the representative is on the phone and their staff, I know because I've done this, I've been a staffer for elected officials, the staff screens the questions for ones that are favorable. Oh, Mr. Congressman, why don't you talk about your plan to, have free puppies and kittens for everybody? It's not a way to hold them accountable. So here's what a lot of folks have been doing across the country. They have what's called an empty chair town hall. So they get a cardboard cutout of the elected official. You put them up there, and you invite the media to come. And you have questioners, and you have a bit of a presentation where the activists say, well, here's what I would ask Congressman X if he was here. He voted to take away health care from 400,000 people in Missouri, and to raise premiums on seniors. That's money coming out of your pocket. Unfortunately, Representative X isn't here to answer the questions, and we'd like him to answer the questions. You call the media and you kick up a storm around that. That's going to be a great story, and it's going to make the Republican look bad. On the flip side of that, we want to be good to our constituents, and we want to make sure that we are holding, town halls and engaging with our folks. And I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about that experience, Mr. Governor, about when you were running, and also I imagine as elected official that you had to do town hall meetings and engaging with constituents. So what are some best practices because I know that we have some local officials on the phone, or some candidates for state legislature and state senate and municipal government on the phone who might benefit from that wisdom.
The one I've been fortunate enough to hold elected office. I've also been fortunate enough to run campaigns in various states in the country. And the one question came out of Oklahoma. I was in Oklahoma and worked with a group of family farmers and others this last cycle, and Senator Inhofe and Coburn and the Republicans all came out for a right to farm initiative that we believe was bad for our environment bad for animals, bad for family farmers, and we were able to successfully win that race in Oklahoma. I think one of the things that is always important, and I would tell everyone, is the communication with the electorate. I found it's always better to go into even a hot town hall and take the heat, as opposed to not showing up. I think for our folks to attend those meetings, I usually plan a little guided democracy where I make sure I plant some of my own folks. We just knock the Republicans because they're screening the calls. But the fact is, you want to make sure your folks show up as well in numbers and be able to balance the negative that would be in the room. My good friend Congressman Carnahan from Missouri, during the 2010 campaigns, he was actually firebombed. It was that angry in our state, but he did a masterful job, and many of them did, at dealing with the anger when it came from the other side. But I think that Democrats need to always be the party that's transparent. That's a value in this country. We need to be the ones that are straight up and straightforward. And I think having direct voter contact is the best way for an elected official to demonstrate that value.
Mm-hmm. There have been a lot of questions. Just a clarification between asking what an earned media event is. The way that we think about it is there are different categories of media. Earned media is stuff that you don't pay for out of pocket. As a paid media is ads. If it's a pop-up ad, before a YouTube video, a television advertisement, a piece of mail that comes to your door, something that you hear on the radio that's a pre-recorded ad, that's all paid. That's a whole other sack of potatoes. Here we're really talking about earned media, and that's, the traditional newspapers and, radio stations and, the local television news and national and cable news, as well as some blogs and online outlets. But it's generally information where you're not paying to broadcast your message somewhere. It's all about your interactions with reporters and putting out a compelling product that the media is compelled to go and cover. What's the most effective way to counter fake news? Specifically, how to counter folks that get mostly Fox and Breitbart information. This is a tough nut to crack because on the Republican side, 17% of registered Republicans trust the news media, and it's not much better among independents. Democrats, it's about 50-50. It's really a tough one. But I think that elevating your arguments in the local media and going local is the way to do it. The larger an outlet, the more people distrust it. The larger an institution, the more people distrust it. I bet you a lot of people have more faith in their mayor than they do in their president. They have a lot more faith in the local community paper or, the anchor that they've been seeing on, local eyewitness news for, the past 10 years than they do watching, Jake Tapper, Anderson Cooper, or Morning Joe. So I would encourage you to focus relentlessly on those local outlets and making sure that you're getting their message out into there because, and polling shows, what do you trust as a news consumer? The smaller the outlet and the more local the outlet, the more you trust them. So that's how I would go about combating fake news. But as we know, the Russian government had a highly orchestrated campaign of fake news to try to hurt Democrats in this. So it's definitely a big problem, and that we're also working through how to fix. I'm not sure if you have any thoughts on that.
But one of the things that I would add is, and for some of these red states, ag states, and others, we talked about trying to make sure we get the right lines drawn and stop the gerrymandering, and we've got to start winning races at the state rep. state Senate level. The other side, the Republicans have third-party verification that can that reinforces the voice of the Republicans, oftentimes the fake news that they have out there to give. You got the candidate, and then you have the voice of the party, and then they have like the Farm Bureau, the Cattlemen's Association, the pork producers, the whole bunch of family farm groups lined up. The Democrats, we have the candidate and the Democrat Party, and we've allowed the Republicans to marginalize our traditional third-party voices in the rural area. They demonize labor, and so many of our voices of the past no longer have any effect. You're talking about fake news. One of the things I talked to Deputy Chair Ellison about, and I know the party's really working on this, is to provide additional voices, verifiers in the communities, in rural states, so that one, I believe, always go to the local paper, but the other thing that matters is for us to have more voices telling the truth within those communities, within those districts, within those states, to allow our side to be able to resonate and push back against just lies.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I want to end with this question because I think it's pretty universal, and it's I'm a young Democrat running for Congress in a red state. What's your advice? The number one thing that I think is valued now, and it's valued, it has been valued in the past, because people have a pretty strong BS meter, and that's be yourself and be authentic and show that you care about the people that you're talking to. I've seen Jason Kander talk a couple of times now at public events, and he tells a story about how he knocked on someone's door, and the guy was a registered Republican, and he had a debate about a particular issue. I can't remember what the issue was. And by the way, for those of you who don't know, Jason Kander, he was the Secretary of State in Missouri. He ran for Senate, and in a state that Trump won by 19 points, he lost by only 3. And he had that famous ad where he's a veteran, and he assembled his rifle with a blindfold on. That kind of catapulted him to fame. But he said that after he got done with this interaction at a door with a registered Republican, the guy said, look, I disagree with you on the issues, but I can tell that you care. I'll vote for you. You can put a sign in my yard if you want to. And then Kander said after that, ever since then I've just been addicted to having those sort of open and honest conversations, looking voters in the eye, and even if they don't agree with your position, if you show them that you care, and if you show them that you're on their side, then they'll at least listen to you, and they might even vote for you, even if they don't agree with you, on every issue. And I'll give you one more quote. This one's from Ed Koch, and it's one of my favorites. If you agree with me on 9 out of 12 issues, you should vote for me. If you agree with me on 12 out of 12 issues, you should probably be in a psychiatrist's office. So that's you don't have to agree with somebody doesn't have to agree with you on every issue in order to vote for you or to like you. They just have to understand. They just have to feel that you're real and that you're speaking to their issues and in a way that shows that you care about them. So with that, I'll give it to the governor for any closing thoughts on that.
For the young Democrat, I tell you to keep running. I think the advice you just heard is right. I'm a former president of Missouri Young Democrats. I married a former president of Missouri Young Democrats, and we need youth in our party. And I want to thank you for putting your name out there. Get in touch with me. I'll do everything I can to help our next generation of leaders.
Amen. Amen. All right. Thank you so much to our guest, former Lieutenant Governor Joe Maxwell from Missouri. I'm Eric. I'm the Deputy Communications Director here at the DNC. Once again, the link to sign up for our talking points list, it's a bit.ly link. Can we actually go back here on the slide just to throw that up one more time? Sorry, it's Yeah, bit.ly/talkers list, and it'll take you to a Google form where you can sign up for our DNC talking points, and it'll give you message updates continuously on the big issues. So once again, Governor, thank you so much. Thank you so much to Vanna Cure, tireless training guru over at the ASDC, and thank you everybody for tuning in. Go out there, go fight, win, hold these Republicans accountable, and let's flip some seats. Thanks everybody.
Thank you all.
Have a good night. Thank you, everyone.